In this final section, we'll explore the intricate relationship between culture and social groups, looking at how they can be seen as interconnected and, in some cases, almost synonymous. Now, not all cultures correspond to specific social groups. Cultures exist at various levels, such as national, regional, ethnic, and so on. For instance, the broader culture of a country may consist of different social groups, each with its own unique subculture. On the other hand, all social groups inherently exhibit cultural traits. When people come together, they bring their shared beliefs, practices, and norms, which contribute to the group's culture. Even small social groups, such as a close knit circle of friends, develop their own unique culture. Keep in mind that although culture and social groups are interconnected, they're not identical. Culture extends beyond social groups, but every social group contributes to and embodies a cultural context. And of course, culture, identity, and social groups, as we said, are interconnected, and these shape who we are. So, culture includes shared beliefs, values, and practices that shape our perceptions of our world. And our identity is a complex mix of culture, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and personal experiences. Social groups provide a sense of belonging and shared identity, and while these components are individually important, the intersection of the elements is crucial. So, group membership fosters a shared understanding of experiences. Simply put, being part of a group helps us understand each other's experiences. For instance, different group names reflect shared social schemas that have been developed through interaction, such as gender fluidity and social clubs with flexible access. Group names may change over time, but the member backgrounds remain varied. However, some categories like race and ethnicity are less flexible. And although group membership fosters a shared understanding, it's important to note that members have diverse backgrounds and experiences. Therefore, while shared values unite them, unique experiences contribute to the overall experience. For example, it's possible to support a cause without personally experiencing it, such as being an ally or advocate for LGBTQIA plus rights, without personally experiencing or identifying to that group. It's also important to be cautious of social political groups as they may have potential downsides. Being a part of such groups might lead to negative experiences like discrimination and limited opportunities. Additionally, when shared expectations exist within a group, it can create behavioral patterns that may not be beneficial for everyone. For instance, an alt right protest does not represent everyone's views and opinions. And the main point to understand is that culture and social groups have mutual influence on each other. Our social identity and self concept are shaped by the culture we belong to. People absorb influence from cultures and contribute context to them. Culture, in turn, is created by groups of people who share common values and beliefs. It's important to note that groups are not homogenous and are composed of individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds. Cultural conditioning is a process that contributes to this cyclical cycle as we learn the values, beliefs, and behaviors of our cultures. And this process begins in childhood and continues throughout our lives. We're exposed to cultural conditioning through our families, schools, communities, and the media. Now, social demographic cultures are based on shared characteristics, and these can include many things such as race, ethnicity, national origin, and sexual orientation. And while these categories are not always voluntary, they can still play a significant role in shaping our cultural identity, as it's shaped by the cultures that we're exposed to throughout our entire lives. And that includes experiences from families, communities, and other groups. So someone who identifies, for instance, as Hispanic may share cultural traditions, language, and food with others who share their heritage of being Hispanic. And so over the next few slides, we'll explore some specific categories of identity. Now, while both ethnicity and race involve cultural aspects and group identity, they still differ in their focus. Ethnicity describes a person's cultural identity based on common markers. It often stems from a common history, geographical location, or nationality. Think of it as the soft think of it as software that shapes cultural experiences. The food you eat, holidays you celebrate, music you listen to. And so things like symbols such as flags, clothing, art, and rituals can represent ethnicity. However, these visual representations can be limiting, as they might not capture the full richness of a culture. A challenge of ethnicity, especially in non-diverse areas, can lead to a feeling of isolation if surrounded by different cultural practices. Race is a sociological classification based on primarily on physical characteristics such as skin tone, hair texture, things like that. It's important to remember that race is a social construct, not a biological one. And unlike ethnicity, race is often perceived as being on display based on appearance. So, race and ethnicity are also distinct concepts with similarities and differences. For instance, both involve group identity and cultural aspects, but as we said, race is always on display, whereas ethnicity could be hidden. And examples of race include things like, for instance, being Asian, black, or white, while ethnicity can include things like someone being Irish, Japanese, or Navajo. Now, ethnic salience refers to the level of importance that ethnicity and race is to an individual regarding their social identity, which is their sense of self. For instance, studies show that racial and ethnic minorities identify this category as central to their self concept, exhibiting a stronger connection to it. However, non persons of color more strongly identify with specific ethnic backgrounds, such as being Irish, Italian, or Polish, and of course, their nationality being either American, German, or so on. However, unhinged ethnic salience can lead to things like prejudiced thinking. This might look like ethnocentrism, that it relates to both ethnicity and race. It describes a tendency to view one's own ethnic or racial group as superior to others. And this in group bias can limit understanding and appreciation of different cultures, leading to incorrect assumptions about others' behavior. It's based on one's own norms, values, and beliefs. All in all, the takeaway here is that ethnicity and race are interconnected, but still distinct. Ethnicity focuses on cultural heritage, while race is based on physical characteristics, and both can influence self identity and be a source of pride. But it's important to be aware of ethnocentrism and celebrate cultural diversity. So, what age culture do you identify with? Are you a Gen Zer? Maybe a younger millennial? What are your parents? Are they Gen Xers or millennials? Or is this all foreign language to you? Well, no worries if it is. Another way cultural groups divide themselves is, of course, by these age groups, their generational groups. So take a few minutes and look at this clip here that is shared by from USA Today called The Greatest Generation through Gen Alpha. Now, considering how generational differences speak to cultural groups and social identity, there are significant generational differences and they're closely tied to culture and social identity in a few important ways. One, shared experiences shape culture. So each generation grows up during a specific historical period with its own social, political, and technological trends. These shared experiences shape the values, beliefs, and customs, thus creating a sort of subculture within a larger society. For example, Gen X experienced the rise of things like MTV and the latchkey generation, which influenced their views on independence and media. And these shared experiences can even become defining characteristics of a generation. For instance, millennials were heavily shaped by 9/11, and they might be more security conscious or even distrustful of authority. And generations can act as social groups, thus providing a sense of belonging and shared identity for individuals within them. People from the same generation might gravitate towards each other due to similar cultural references or life experiences. These social groups can also influence how individuals navigate their social groups, like workplaces or communities. A Gen Z employee might value a more collaborative work environment due to their generation's emphasis on teamwork. But generational identity is just one piece of the puzzle that makes up a person's social identity. As we said, ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, and other factors also play roles. And this category of identity can be more or less important depending on the situation and in comparison to other identities. For instance, someone might identify more strongly with their ethnicity than with their generation. However, generation can intersect with other identities. For instance, as a woman of color, they might have a different experience within Gen X than a white man from the same generation. And in some cases, cultures can exist in a more abstract sense, that is, beyond particular groups of people. And one example is the culture of honor. This refers to a culture in which individuals feel obligated to defend their integrity and reputation by responding to insults, provocations, and threats, often through the use of violence. And so cultures of honor exist worldwide and manifest differently. And examples include things like prominently the US South, with its emphasis on social etiquette and avoiding public disrespect, but resorting to violence for serious offenses. So think about cowboys defending their honor with with a draw. It's also expressed in things like inner city gangs, mafias, cartels, and so on. And so with these, there is similar emphasis on reputation, thus leading to violence to protect it within these groups. Behaviors are driven by the need for respect and self-preservation. And even in the Middle East, honor is tied heavily to family, tribal identity, and so on. Violence against women is also used to preserve family honor, even resulting in what we call honor killings. And so a culture of honor sheds light on the complex relationship between cultural groups and social identity. These cultures of honor can be a tool for social control. The threat of violence discourages behavior deemed disrespectful or threatening to the social order. And this can lead to rigid hierarchies within the group, with those at the top demanding respect and wielding the most power to enforce the honor code. Cultures of honor further emphasize maintaining the reputation of not only individuals, but also the entire group. And this creates a strong sense of collective identity and responsibility. But not all aspects of the culture of honor are negative. Honor can also motivate positive actions like defending others or standing up for what's right. So, a culture of honor fosters a strong sense of belonging within a group. Defending one's honor is seen as defending the honor of the entire group, and not everyone within a culture of honor will resort to violence. So, individual personalities and situations obviously play a major role in that outcome. So, we'll also shift gears a bit now and talk a bit about cancel culture and how it works. This brief video highlights how cancel culture works. So, take a look at the video shared here. Now, again, cancel culture is another abstract form of culture in the, non-material sense. And so it's sometimes referred to as call out culture or cancel culture. And it involves publicly shaming and withdrawing support, whether that's financial, social, or professional, from individuals, groups, brands, organizations, or pretty much any entity that's deemed offensive. Now, as a non material culture, meaning intangible and not person specific, it represents a collective response to a perceived offense or problematic behavior. And though there is a disagreement on its origins, many theorize that it's rooted in the culture of Black communities who've long challenged and criticized things like injustice. Advocates argue that it serves as a mechanism to hold people responsible for their actions, especially when they perpetuate harmful ideologies or engage in discriminatory behavior. Cancel culture is comparable to things like boycotts, as they rely on the collective power of individuals to withdraw support. Yet, while some attribute it to social justice movements' effort to expose injustice, others argue it threatens free speech. So, cancel culture can be caused by various factors. For instance, it can serve as a means to hold individuals accountable for their statements or behaviors and make individuals consider the consequences of their statements, expose instances of racism, sexism, or so on. And it also encourages people to think before they speak. All in all, it can act as a teaching moment, encouraging reflection and accountability. Furthermore, cancel culture can have both positive and negative consequences. On the positive side, it can promote accountability and provide a platform for voices that have been silenced or ignored. It can also be seen as a form of free speech, and its proponents argue that it is an important tool for promoting accountability and giving marginalized groups a voice. However, critics of cancel culture argue that it can have negative impacts on public discourse. They suggest that cancel culture can be unproductive and may fail to bring about real social change. Critics also argue that it can lead to intolerance and amounts of bullying, including cyberbullying. But it's not limited to celebrities. Anyone can be essentially canceled for offensive behavior on things like social media, with potential consequences such as job loss, um, being ostracized, and so on. So cancel culture reaches beyond the scope of celebrities and other public figures, and anyone can be canceled for these offensive behaviors, with the potential consequences such as things, as we said, job loss, and of course, social media amplifies this effect. So current research is suggesting, however, that cancel culture is declining, and this may be attributed to money and power, the decentralization of the internet, and the pushback from certain public figures. And finally, we'll discuss a rather prevalent phenomenon known as the hookup culture. And so, this particular culture embraces and promotes casual sexual encounters, encompassing one night stands and similar activities that are shown to be devoid of emotional intimacy, bonding, or committed relationship. Although the physical interactions within hookup scenarios may exhibit considerable diversity among individuals, the overarching objective remains consistent as casual experiences that are devoid of these expectations beyond the physical encounter itself. In today's society, hookup culture has eclipsed traditional dating in terms of prevalence. Young adults in particular gravitate toward casual encounters rather than adhering to formal dating rituals. And as expected, technology plays a pivotal role in the proliferation of hookup culture. With the rise of social media platforms and dating apps, accessibility to potential partners has surged. A simple swipe or a click can lead to a spontaneous rendezvous. And regarding the controversy surrounding the outcome of hookup culture, on one hand, proponents argue that it fosters sexual freedom, liberation, and allowing individuals from conventional constraints. However, contradictory narratives exist. So critics contend that hookup culture reinforces power differentials, doing so disproportionately, which benefits certain privileged groups while marginalizing others. Furthermore, hookup culture has been linked to perpetuating the rape myth culture. These are prejudicial beliefs about sexual assault, particularly directed at women, and are exacerbated within this context. It's crucial to recognize the harmful implications of such narratives and their impact on societal attitudes towards sexual consent and autonomy. And there are group differences based on sex and gender stereotypes within hookup culture. Studies highlight disparities in attitudes and behaviors between men and women, and they're influenced by societal expectations. Research indicates that men and women exhibit varying attitudes and satisfaction levels when it comes to hooking up. For instance, men tend to report higher satisfaction following casual sexual encounters. Interestingly, both genders believe that others have better experiences than they do. And there are several factors that influence hookup experiences, including attraction, alcohol consumption, and feeling pressured. For instance, a classic study conducted by Clark and Hatfield in 1989 explored college campuses and their dating dynamics. Conley replicated the study in 2011 with some modifications. Yet, instead, the findings revealed that female participants were more receptive in certain scenarios. And these scenarios likely involve situations where women felt comfortable expressing their interest or engaging in a casual encounter. Yet within hookup culture, there are expectations regarding emotions, communication, and behavior. And these expectations significantly differ for men and women. While this is the case, hookup culture often places more pressure on boys and young men to avoid developing emotional connections or quote unquote catching feelings during sexual encounters. And as expected, social groups influence may identify influence hookup culture. Sex and gender differences also may stem from societal expectations, evolving sexual scripts, and individual preferences. Similarly, people with high self-concept, clarity, and confidence in their beliefs and values, and they may approach hookups differently than those with lower self-concepts and clarity. Finally, participation may be influenced by social group norms, considering conformity. And so my final takeaway is to tell you that to stay diligent and be mindful to avoid really uncomfortable and possibly devastating situations. And so to summarize this third section, we've explored how culture and social groups are very intertwined, deeply intertwined. We've seen that culture is not just an external force, but it plays a vital role in shaping our individual and collective identities. Culture influences how we see ourselves, our self concept, and is formed through the shared values we hold within our groups. It's also important to recognize the diverse forms that culture can take, and this includes traditional social demographics like race and ethnicity, but also age, generation, and more abstract concepts like culture of honor and cancel culture. And each of these cultural forms impacts our behavior. And so the dynamics of our social interactions and our personal experiences in significant ways. Ultimately, understanding how cultures function as a social group is crucial for comprehending the complexity of human nature and societal structures. And as we close out this chapter, to conclude, we've explored the complex relationship between culture and group dynamics. We've seen that culture is not just a backdrop to our lives, it actively shapes our self concept, our values, and how we behave in social settings. Social groups, in turn, are key building blocks to society. They provide us with some sense of belonging, influence our identities, and structure our interactions with others. Importantly, we emphasize that culture and social groups are not separate entities, but are deeply interconnected. They shape each other and together form the lens through which we understand our world. And ultimately, a deeper understanding of culture and group dynamics is essential as it fosters cultural competence, which is crucial for effective communication, collaboration, and minimizing conflict in our increasingly diverse world. Thank you so much for tuning in to this chapter 13 lecture.